Hey everyone. I don't know if I've discussed this on this channel yet, but for any of you that didn't know, I didn't start out wanting to write books or direct movies. I originally wanted to be like a makeup artist. Back when I was like in second or third grade, I started learning about artists like Rick Baker and later artists like Tom Savini and all these guys. But unfortunately, in fourth grade, I got like a Terminator 2 kit that I was like so psyched about. And when I had finished it, I was like, oh my lord, this is so horrible. And it really crushed my dreams of like becoming like the next Rick Baker. Or I would have been probably more like the next Peter Jackson, because like I am very much a fan of his. Like, oh, not even Peter Jackson. Oh my gosh, I'm bad. I'm confusing my Gordo directors. I'm sorry, man. Guillermo del Toro. He's like one of the last great directors that really focuses on movie monster makeup. So like I'm like, good job on you, man. And you really deserve the Oscar for Pan's Labyrinth, but at least they recognize Shape of Water. But of course, talking about Shape of Water, it comes to my next subject. One of the classic monster movies I love from the 50s is Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it's one of the DVDs I cherish. I loved learning about that movie, and especially about MIlicent Patrick, who I had never heard about until I had seen this documentary and the commentary for Creature of the Black Lagoon. She is responsible for one of the most creative alien monster characters that came out of the 50s, and of course very much classic Universal horror. He is very much in that range, even though like it was done 10 years after like the last Universal monster movie that came out. But when I found out about this book, The Lady from the Black Lagoon by Mallory I hope I'm saying that name right, I was stoked, because I said like I had never heard of this woman. There's a book coming out about her. So great. I want to know all about this lady. And from the pictures that are in here, she was also like a gorgeous lady. And finding out one of the big info about this book is that she was also an actress. So like, yeah, obviously, according to Mary, she wasn't like a great actress, but she looked glamorous. She at least looked like a model and stuff like that. So it is like kind of cool that like someone from like that kind of status would have an interest in drawing, and especially creating these classic monsters. She only did like two that are kind of iconic. The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and then there's a movie called This Island Earth that I didn't know about, that she had created the alien monsters for that, which they kind of look like the Mars Attacks Martians, but kind of unique in their own way. That was a cool fact that I didn't know. Overall, what I have to say about this book in particular is that it is, I almost wanted to call it like the horror movie version of Julie and Julia, or Julia and Julia. I don't know how, I can't remember how that name's pronounced. It's a good movie. I've never read the book. It is very much on that level, but dealing about horror movies, because really this is telling two stories. It's telling the story of MIlicent Patrick, who sadly died around the 90s. I think that's correct. I think that's when she passed away, which is always sad to learn about. But it's also the story about Mallory herself. She is a horror movie producer who has dealt with like sexual discrimination and everything like that. Any kind of job is going to have to deal with that issue, because sorry, unlike me, I have been like under the unique experience that like most of my bosses, most of my superiors have been women, and I have never had an issue with that. And they've all been easy to work with, not difficult. Of course, as much as bosses range, at not as difficult as bosses can be. So like, no big issue there. But it's also the story about Mallory learning, pretty much being influenced by Mallory Patrick. Mallory being influenced by MIlicent. see how fast my brain goes and my mouth don't want to work. But it's very much the story of MIlicent Patrick, but also the story about learning how difficult it was to research her life. But Mallory definitely had a passion for this woman, her professional idol, so, like, awesome. It goes over, like, all of her experiences dealing with discrimination in the film industry, as well as how difficult it is sometimes to, like, find information about people when they're not so well named. But it is very fascinating. If you have ever had an interest of doing a nonfiction book, I would actually recommend this, because it really gives you, like, an insight of, like, the research and everything that it's going to be entailing. And I actually especially love how this is mixed up, where, like, it's talking about her research, but you don't know what she found out until the next chapter, where it goes back to MIlicent's life. So I said, like, I love that unique back and forth that this book had. Ultimately, accumulating with, like, learning what happened to this woman. And sadly, it's, like, one of the saddest discrimination kind of issues, where, like, it's that silent blockade of, like, you don't get to do your work because of one irritated employer. So, like, they talk a lot about the Westmore family, which is probably, like, one of the most influential makeup artist dynasties out there. Probably the only one. Fortunately, like, Michael Westmore, who is responsible for most of the modern day Star Trek, he actually seems like a good guy. I watched Face Off, the reality show, all the time, and he came in as a consultant many times, and he always seemed like a good guy. So, like, maybe he's the exception, because I don't want to write off the whole family because of one jerk. But it is the sad story that this woman was really starting to, like, grow into, like, a true professional. She could have been, like, a legend in her own time, but sadly, because of one of the major decisions is that, like, so much of Creature from the Black Lagoon was promoted by this woman, largely because they thought it was so unique that a woman had created, like, this iconic kind of monster in the first try. So, and of course, there was squabble about that, and unfortunately, it ended up with her losing her job. So, like, it's a sad story. Very sad story, and this goes into a lot more detail about that than the documentary does. The commentary gets into it a little bit more. But yeah, even if you haven't seen Creature from the Black Lagoon, I do insist that you get this book, especially if you love monster movie makeup. You learning about new people that could have been famous, but not really. But it's also unique that this is, like, one woman really finding a role model that fit her, and it's a role model that most people didn't even know. So I said that is such a unique thing to talk about. So, like, yeah, Mallory O'Mara's The Lady from the Black Lagoon, probably one of the best reads I've read this year. So, like, enjoy it if you find it, and I will talk to you next time.